Hello, this is Property Matters, a weekly catch-up on all matters property, supported by Fairview International Property Consultancy and auctionproperty.co.uk. We're live every Sunday from 10 a.m, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and our website, propertymatterstv.co.uk. If you're watching on the website, leave us a Google review and get involved if you're watching on social media in the comments section below. Any subjects that you'd like us to cover, the email address is hello@propertymatterstv.co.uk. Also, if you'd rather get us on the move, so to speak, with a podcast, you can do that every Monday, 10 a.m, 24 hours after the live show, and you can find it wherever you get your podcasts from. And we're also live across the week on Dilsey Radio as well. So let's take a look at the property news with Joe Joshi. Morning, Joe.
Good morning, Paul. Good morning, everybody. Good morning to our viewers and listeners, of course, on podcast. I think it's quite a good idea, that podcast. More and more people are listening to stuff as they move along, and we'll make sure that we are in your ears.
Absolutely. Right. Okay. First question, or first subject rather, this morning. An interesting one, this, because it's been suggested that the government should take a stake in the rental market to fix the affordable housing crisis. This is according to Anisha Beveridge, who's the head of research at Hamptons International. Speaking to financial website This Is Money, she said that the government's involvement could take the form of buying homes from house builders and renting them out until interest rates fall and the market picks up. She says, given how few homes are likely to be sold this year, we think it's an opportunity for the government to take a stake in the rental market, a bit like Norway's sovereign wealth fund, but investing in homes rather than oil. She told the website that such a fund could buy new homes from both private developers and housing associations and rent them to tenants. So, what do you think, Joe? Do you think the government should get involved in the rental market and become a landlord?
That's all they really need to do now, isn't it? Is to become the landlord. In essence, the government are already indirectly landlords through the housing associations, because obviously one of the reasons why the housing associations exist is to be able to provide social housing at a perhaps more cost-effective way from new developers, or the opportunity to buy properties that people want to live in. Like family homes, for example. So there's already some sort of existence as an indirect way, because when somebody, as a new developer, when they're building and the planners are there, what they do say to them is that a certain percentage will go to social housing, and that social housing is at a discounted rate so that they can rent out to first-time buyers or people that require assistance, or offer help, not so much help to buy, but share ownership. So sometimes they'll offer share ownership, maybe it's 20 or 30 or 40%, and they could buy a percentage each year from the housing association, allowing people to get on the first run of the property ladder. So there is already an existence through housing associations. I'm not quite sure how they would actually end up directly managing and buying. The idea is obviously good. Because obviously, people are saying that if you can't sell them, then they should go and buy them and then rent them out. But they're using a vehicle through housing association to do exactly that. And even if they were to buy it directly, they'll end up having to give it to someone to manage, and that will not go to managing agents or letting agents. It will become another tier in the government body, for example. There'll be another section created that will manage the portfolio for the government, or on behalf of the government. So, in theory, it's a good idea, but I think what she is missing there is that it already exists, and it's already a painful idea, because when developers do build, they end up having to give a section of their properties to the housing association. Now, the problem is that it does cause some concern for the development. For example, somebody might build 100 or 200 flats or an estate, and a section of that would become social housing. The annoying part, I suppose, is that developers feel, and are made to feel, that obviously if they have a social housing aspect of it, they need to sort of almost group that together in one corner, so that all the people that are in the housing association property are in the same thing. And that is almost a discrimination, because you are setting out not allowing integration of society and community. You're actually almost sort of saying, well, look, those are the cheaper homes, those belong to the housing association, so you're in that section. And I think that probably doesn't really help. But the reason why they do that, Paul, is because it doesn't help the values of the overall properties, or at least they think it doesn't help the overall properties.
I mean, I was just thinking, actually, really, in some ways, it's just the reinvention of council houses, isn't it? Because, I mean, the state was involved, all right, it was the local councils that ran the local council housing, but it was kind of the state system, wasn't it, that was running the properties back in the day.
Yes, I mean, in all honesty, whilst it gave a lot of people in the Thatcher era the chance to sort of get on the property ladder, they have never really, no successive government has ever really recovered from that idea. The idea was good at the time, but we got rid of a lot of housing stock. A lot of people had the privilege of buying those homes at a fraction of the costs because they were renting them. Meant that the government got some money back in, but in all honesty, they've never managed to grasp the amount of homes that they got rid of, which they already owned, and they've spent the last, best part, what now, 30 years, 40 years, trying to recoup that. And every time somebody comes into power, they keep saying, "Oh, we're going to build 3,000 more homes." Well, if they probably didn't sell them, we wouldn't be in the situation that we are now in. But because of inflation, because of cost of building, cost of land, and everything else, they're just never going to catch up in trying to do that. But yes, you're absolutely right. Theoretically, it's really going back to the original idea of owning a council property.
She maintains, this Anisha Beveridge, she maintains that it should encourage house building, and a big investment in the rental market would ultimately put downward pressure on rents. I suppose if there were all these houses are suddenly available for rent, then there wouldn't be the spiralling costs because the rarity of property available to rent right now.
Well, look, the whole thing is designed about market forces. In my opinion, when they build, they have to provide a certain aspect of them as social housing. And building costs have gone up so much, land costs have gone so much, that it's now almost an impossible task to try and catch up. It does continue to create those positions to buy and develop, and they are becoming more and more expensive and more out of the reach of the first-time buyers, which is where it all starts. And of course, if the housing associations were given that privilege, not everybody feels that they want to start through the housing association. There's a, how can I say it? There's a social issue there, isn't there, where people think, well, actually, I don't want to buy and invest in a housing association house because I'm going to be not in the area that I'd like to be. I'd like to buy where everybody else lives. And I think what they really got to think about is integration rather than segregation. By segregating it as a corner of a house of a development with a housing association, what the message is that you go out there and buy in the housing because that's a bit cheaper, or that gives you a chance to get on the run of the first time buyer ladder. But they will continue to do that in order to make sure that there is, and we know historically we all tend to build our way out. It doesn't matter what country you're in. When things go wrong, building is the way to get back into society, get back on employment.
Moving on to our second story of the week, which is fall-throughs. We're still looking back, of course, at all the figures being produced at 2023, so this is another one of these stories, but they were looking at Q3 of 2023, and they were saying that the fall-throughs are estimated to have cost the UK buyers and sellers around £270 million. Now, that's in literally 1 quarter of a year, so for 3 months, it's almost 100 million a month that's been lost through fall-throughs. Information platform Home Sale Pack analysed the latest data from 20CI for Q3 of 23 on the number of estimated fall-throughs seen across the market, as well as the estimated cost of a fall-through, taking inflation and the increased cost of legal fees into account. The figure shows that the number of transactions falling through is on the up, increasing by 13.3% in Q3 of last year, having already increased by 9% between Q1 and quarter two of the same year. So at the same time, the average cost of a fall through in quarter three climbed to £3,433, an increase of 51 on the previous quarter and 84 since the start of the year. As a result, the platform estimates that the total cost of fall-throughs to UK buyers and sellers sat just shy of 270 million during the third quarter of last year, 15% higher than Q2 in total. So what I find interesting, and we have talked about this before, obviously, but the amazing thing is that we've still got such an antiquated system that we end up with these fall-throughs. But I guess part of this also, of course, would be the fact that people agree to buy a house, then they go and get their mortgage, or their mortgage is refused because of the more stringent levels that they have to achieve to get a mortgage.
Yes, it's quite sad, really. In all the years that I've been in business, this area just has not managed to get itself sorted, and it gets worse when you get these so-called interrupters coming into the market. People like Purple Bricks and Strike, who turn around and say we can do everything for nothing. And you know, I'm a firm believer that no pain, no gain. If someone hasn't got any skin in the game, they really don't care, and we live on hope and prayer. And that is, we hope and pray that this guy or person who is interested in buying or starts buying the process is someone that's going to end up concluding. 9 times out of 10 they don't, and fall through rates are at 50%, which is pretty high. In fact, it's too high. You know, if you're putting 10 deals together, you know half of those are not going to go. So the question is always about the quality as opposed to the quantity. The quality is pretty low because people think, okay, it's a deal, and you can't blame salespeople, you can't blame negotiators, the enthusiasm that they have, and it's part of the whole kudos of a salesperson, that buzz, that zip, you know, that they fix that they get, saying, look, I've got a sale, and also it's appeasing the sellers, because you know you might have had something on the market for some time, and all of a sudden here is a, you know, maybe a small inkling of interest, and boom, you want to put that sale together, and you know probably in your heart of hearts that sale's not going to progress. And also it's about the chain system. We have a system very antiquated, but can't be often broken, and many companies have set up in breaking chains so that they can come along and buy someone's property in the middle of a chain and say, right, we'll offer you X. But then of course it's about percentage and money. And if that money can't be, you know, paid for it, nobody's going to break the chain. So what happens is, the long process of it is that fall throughs happen. And there are so many reasons, sometimes really ridiculously feeble reasons for why things don't go. I mean, back in the days, people used to argue about things like carpets and curtains. I mean, that's moved on a lot now because most people don't want someone else's carpets and curtains. But back in the days of when I started in the 80s, we could spend a month discussing whether the lounge carpet was something that somebody was going to leave behind. And in all honesty, now it's probably cheaper that they take it with you because it costs more to dispose of the damn thing. But you know, those are the things that would have created a problem of a fall through. Oh, I don't want the carpet. She says she doesn't like the curtain. That's it. That's the end of the story. We're not going to buy that property. And really, when you think about it, those were really silly reasons why things actually didn't progress. But now it's most about understanding the chain, understanding the actual, you know, the deal, understanding the information that a buyer has given you, and whether you think that is, and you can scrutinize it till the cows come home. But if they've decided that they're not going to buy it, they're not going to buy it, and that's the reason. And I'm a firm believer that, you know, time has come along where people should have skin in the game. They should have a system where basically someone has to put some money down, because the trust factor is not there, is it? It's not about a gentleman's agreement, a shake of the hand and a nod and a wink and say that's all okay. It's now really down to the fact that, are you in it? And if you're in it, you've got to put some skin in it, and that means whether it's £500 or £1,000 into a pot where they say, well, you know, if you decide after all of this that you're going to not buy, then the other person gets the balance, because it's the cost. The seller gets that. But of course, neither are happy to do it. And then, of course, there's all these logistics about, you know, who, where, and why should a deposit be held. I mean, look what has happened buy to, not the rental market, these sort of situations have occurred where people have to have certain accounts to be able to put their deposits in. So it does become a little bit messy. But the point is that, I think if such a system doesn't get brought in soon, these fall through rates will just continue to rise. And to be honest with you, in the next year, next 10 years, next 5 years, there'll come another, disruptor, as they call it. But I think, they're just looking for, you can't, there's no such thing as a free lunch, Paul. And what they think there is that, let's do this way. And that's why the fall through rates go up. And actually, they don't account for that. They don't account for the headache, the staff, the people, the advertising, the marketing, the keys, the portal. All of those costs that are fixed costs. And if it falls through, that's money out of your own pocket. So I think agents have got to work on that.
Yeah, I guess if you're in a chain and the very first part of the chain, the first time buyer maybe doesn't get their mortgage and then their sale falls through, and if you're 2 or 3 up the line, I mean, that's not your fault. Nothing's happened from your point of view. And I guess there's not much you can do about that. But thinking about it in the wider sense, is there anything that a seller can do to protect themselves from the spectre of a fall through?
Yes, I mean, I think first and foremost, a seller must not agree a sale until such certain action. We have that sort of old adage of actions speak louder than words. So if a buyer is buying, and when I was doing the agency side of things, I would look at it on the basis that if someone's actually put some money in and paid for a survey, for example, that was a tick box that told me that they are genuinely on that journey, because they've put some skin in the game, they've put some money in, they've spent the money on a survey, put an application in for a mortgage, and the lenders, valuers are now been in touch. So I mean, if you don't get that in the first 4 or 5 weeks maximum, that house should remain on the market until such time as somebody does. It then gives cause of concern to the buyer to make sure that, why is it still being offered? Well, it's being offered because you haven't said what you were going to do. So, make some noise. Do the things that you're going to do. The legals are probably the worst scenario, because nobody starts the legal process until they think they've got a survey and a mortgage offer done. Now, if you imagine the journey on this, then take day one, the sale is agreed, the memorandums have gone out, and then nothing. It just sits there. And you spend your next, 8 weeks, 10 weeks chasing. And you're chasing, who are you chasing? You're chasing a solicitor. Well, the solicitor says, I've got no money on account, I've got no instructions, I can't do the searches. So that's parked. We are not going to do anything because the survey hasn't been done by the lender. So that could be another 4 weeks before you even get there. And then maybe they're not successful in getting that through the criteria from the lender, and they're going to change to another lender. And before you know it, that's another 6, 8 weeks that's gone. So it's the system itself that doesn't. So until then, it should remain on the market to another buyer who might be able to come along. And that's where the unfairness comes. The unfairness is that somebody has put some time and energy trying to do this. It's not their fault that they haven't passed maybe a credit score, or their solicitor hasn't done their work, or they don't park with £500-600 on an account. That's the archaicness. So there must be, sooner or later, there's got to be some sort of policy, some sort of insurance policy that a seller can take out, knowing that they need to be protected against fall throughs and against costs. Otherwise, it will continue as it is.
We shall keep an eye on that story for sure, I know, over the coming months on Property Matters. Final story of the week this week, Joe, which we were going to cover last week, but we got so much involved in the 9 things that are going to define the 2024 property market, we didn't get time for this story. But I still think it's worth talking about, and that is the data from Rightmove that came in about what they call the Boxing Day bounce. So the 26% increase in new sellers beat the record of previous years. So basically, this is when people decide they've spent all the time with the family on Christmas Day, they're bored out their tiny minds on Boxing Day, so they decide to go and look for a new house on Boxing Day. Apparently, this is a thing. And this year, 26% more people did it than the previous year. Buyers also got their New Year moving plans into motion on Boxing Day, with a number of buyers contacting estate agents about homes for sale nearly quadrupling, up 273%, Joe, from Christmas Day, and 17% higher than Boxing Day the last year. Visits to the Rightmove platform nearly doubled, 84% between Christmas Day and Boxing Day, and were 8% higher than last year. A boost was expected since Boxing Day traditionally signals the start of the home mover activity, starting to ramp up following the usual lull over Christmas. So, did you feel your Boxing Day bounce, Joe?
Well, it's interesting actually that, I was just sitting there thinking about, what Boxing Day now means as opposed to what it originally was for. Of course, originally it was for the fact that you'd actually opened up all your presents and things were now needed to probably be boxed away, and you had a Boxing Day of clearing up and all sorts of other things. But I think the connotation of now packing your bags and moving on after Christmas lunch is probably the real new Boxing Day, because you probably had a row over lunch and decided that this is the end of it, and I'm going to now start packing my bags. And tomorrow is the beginning of my move. So Rightmove have obviously utilised that to the maximum and created a new reason for what is called Boxing Day. And you start either boxing each other and say, right, that's it, it's all over, we're going, or we're going to pack our bags and move on. So I think there's a new connotation for Boxing Day. But anyway, that's just my my weird sense of humour.
The way your mind works, yeah.
My way my mind works. But the idea behind Boxing Day, and of course, the surge is clear. It's always been there, Paul. And of course, in historic times, people would probably go and buy a Property News or buy the local paper and start to sort of flick through. So this data probably wasn't as available as it is now, because there's more eyes on smartphones and on iPads and iPhones and all sorts of other stuff that allows them to sort of start getting bored and start to flick through the idea. And also, if you've got your family around the table over Christmas, the chances are you start thinking, well, actually, this place has now, we've outgrown it. It's a bit small. Or it's the other way around. It's too big. I'm on my own, all by myself, and therefore maybe it's time to pack up and move to something even smaller or something bigger. So I think it is a point where people do start sort of trigger off and think, well, this is the time for us to do, and all the reasons and all the stories and all the genuine, plans start to become something that they action perhaps on Boxing Days, and that's why there's a huge surge in the search of the type or the area or what they're going to plan for the following year as where they're going to move. So yes, it is. I'm not saying that it's all real though. I think it's more about curiosity rather than the fact that they are. But of course, you've got to start somewhere. And I think Rightmove is looking at those stats that on Boxing Day, there's a huge surge of number of people that start to look or start to think about which way they're going to go. And for that reason, I think Boxing Day has become a popular day to sort of, see where they are. But none of that really, I think, transpires into, if you actually went and spoke to agents directly, which I have, just having to see what the market's doing, what their feelings are and so forth. The actual end result is definitely not the result that Rightmove publish by saying there's the huge surge. So I think it's about curiosity killed the cat. The curiosity is scenario of Boxing Day. Let me see what I can get and what's going on. And I'm bored, as opposed to, am I going to actually get there and start there? So the journey starts, but I'm not sure it ends that way.
Yeah, I was just going to say, there's no guarantee, just because it could be a lot of tire kickers, as they say. But a cynic in me would say a lot of this is just a little bit of sort of New Year hype, just to get people talking about moving and buying and selling property.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, look, we know, and I always say that probably the top 5 subjects on a dinner table, and one of them happens to be property. It's there. It doesn't matter whether it's at Christmas, Boxing Day, Easter Sunday, or any other time that you want to take it. It is one of the subjects that everyone at some stage has to come across, whether they're renting, whether they're moving on a short term, whether they're moving countries, whether they're moving is moving, and so it's always going to be a subject that's going to be discussed. It just so happens that people are around the Christmas dinner table and they think, well, this is the time, and the next day, I suppose, boredom sets in, so they start looking at potentially things like Rightmove and Zoopla and all the other sites that go there. But that data is now more readily available and collectible. It wasn't there because obviously previously it was local papers and nobody knew how to sort of generate that.
No, absolutely. It's interesting to get your feel on whether you think that that's translated through into a more positive situation in the market right now, because clearly this time last year people were still looking at the prospect of interest rates going up and nobody really knew where it was going to stop. This year everyone seems to take it for granted that they're going to fall, and that's, I suppose, been underlined by the fact that some building societies and banks have actually started to gently lower their rates in expectation, presumably, of a cut in the interest rate. So do you feel that that's translated, that so-called Boxing Day bounce, has that translated into activity in January?
No, I don't think it has. I think it'll be a while before that actually translates. I suppose what they're trying to do is about putting the fishing net out, sprat to catch a mackerel here. You're going to actually throw out that net about reducing some fixed rates, trying to entice the people that may be considering that it's okay to buy. But it is an election year and there's going to be lots and lots of toys that are going to be thrown out, lots of gimmicks that some of them may or may not actually transpire to be what people want to happen. But, the bank rate went up speedily, rapidly last year in 23. It put a lot of people in a lot of difficult situation. That's not going to just get itself tidied up in a heartbeat. Combination of utility cost and, of course, the bank rate really has put a huge amount of pressure on families all over, to such an extent that the average family is now having to find probably almost another £1,000 or so a month more. And that's a lot of money to find. So yes, interest rates are being offered. First-time buyers are being enticed. There are rates out there now being offered at fixed rates at anything between 4.5, 4.25, and there'll be, as time goes on, probably lesser ones. The base rate is still 5.25, and we expect that in the first budget, which I think is in March, we'll probably, or close to it, we'll start to see some drops there. Again, it's more about enticing people into what could be the future of any government that's going to happen. So, but I don't think that it's actually ended up on the table right now. It's just talk, and maybe another, spring bounce is probably what we're now looking for. It's not a New Year bounce. I think the spring bounce may be, depending on what those actual rates translate into and how many people can borrow. The problem also has become, and conversation that I've had, is that the models are very stringent. So they might offer the rates at maybe 4%, but the stress test that is being done is still done at a much higher rate. And that normally means that those people that think they're going to get a mortgage offer and get a fixed rate may not be offered that amount, and therefore they'll probably just shy away and think, I'll sit back. That's why the rental market is extremely busy at the moment, because people are just sitting and waiting to make sure that it does actually translate into something, all these changes, for people, so that they can actually start to make a commitment for a long term. Ideally, yes, they would love to buy because it's cheaper to buy than it is to go and rent. But at the same time, they may not be in a position to buy.
Yes, I mean, if you were thinking to buy a property now, you wouldn't rush to the Rightmoves and the like right now, because you'd want to see what was going to come up in the budget in March and any other electoral temptation that they might dream up. And of course, if that means that, as Rishi Sunak has suggested, that he's going to go to the country in maybe October, November time, or certainly in the last quarter, that could spell quite a dull year for the property market.
Well, as a rule, most property people are expecting a dull year. I mean, you can't take that away. Yes, they are going to throw out some goodies, but those goodies are not going to translate into actual business, I think, in 24. most people are saying that 24 will be a subdued market because of the uncertainty of, and it's not just, the UK, it's worldwide. I mean, there's elections pretty much everywhere for new governments, and it's the old story when America, sneezes, we catch a cold situation, and so it's those. There's a lot of that going on at the moment, and then of course, the crises around the world are going to translate in pockets. So people are just a little cautious, and rightly so. Can't say that they shouldn't, and they say cash is king. So this is a buyer's market. Cash is king at this moment in time, and there are some opportunity for first-time buyers, and there are the best opportunity, in all honesty, for first-time buyers because the investors are sitting on their hands and not looking at the buy-to-let market. So there are good chances, but not everybody's going to pass the stress test. So it's the lesser of the two evil. What do you do? So maybe the best thing to do is just stay where you are. And so I think that's the kind of thing, which is not encouraging coming from me, but I'm just trying to be as real as possible that it's going to be a slow pace in 24.
Well, it may be a dull year in property, Joe, but it won't be a dull year on Property Matters, that's for sure. We'll sit here and talk about it for as long as we can. And we'll be back with some more Property Matters very, very soon.